It was the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus had just completed feeding 5,000 people from a few loaves and fishes. And there was a spontaneous party among the people. They wanted Jesus to be the new king of Israel. Jesus had no interest in being the new king, so he left, went up into the mountains alone, told the 12 to go back down and cross the Sea of Galilee. You can see them heading back down to the seashore thinking, but the time was so right for him to proclaim himself king. But they follow his instruction and head across the Sea of Galilee, and about halfway across, a terrible storm kicks up. Not unusual on the Sea of Galilee, but to make matters worse, they look out on the water and a ghost is walking toward them. The ghost speaks. He says, "Take courage. It is I." Interesting word, courage. I always thought to be courageous meant to step forward without any fear whatsoever, but finally it occurred to me that's not courage, that's stupidity. No, courage is stepping forward even though you are absolutely filled with fear. And Peter rather courageously thought he'd heard that ghost before, and he said, "Lord, if that's you, tell me to walk to you in the water." So Jesus said, "Okay, Peter, walk to me in the water." So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water. You ever done that? I've never done that. I don't know anybody who's ever, well, actually, I take that back. When I was a kid growing up in northern Ohio, we went to this church camp called Round Lake Christian Assembly, and they had a big round lake. And one night they were doing Bible reenactments, and they decided to do this story. And so they had a floating dock in the middle of the lake, and it was really cool. They put just enough ballast in that dock to bring it right down to water level. I mean, it looked like Jesus was walking on the water. It was so cool. Only problem was, Jesus couldn't tell where the edge of the dock was. And he fell into the water, and then it turned out Jesus didn't swim all that well. So the disciples had to save him, kind of ruined the impact of the whole thing. Did the rest of the disciples get out of the boat? No. Only one with the courage to get out of the boat and walk in the water was Peter. Oh, I know. He took his eyes off Jesus, fell into the water, cried, "Lord, save me." That's not the important point. The important point is that he had the courage to get out of the boat and walk in the water in the first place. You know, there comes a time when you just have to get out of the boat. I knew from the time I was 4 or 5 years of age that I was transgender. In my naivete, I thought I got to choose. I thought a gender fairy would arrive and say, "Okay, what's it going to be?" But alas, no gender fairy arrived, so I just lived my life. I didn't hate being a boy, I just knew I wasn't one. Went to college, got married, had kids, built a career. But the call toward authenticity has all the subtlety of a smoke alarm. And eventually decisions have to be made. And so I came out as transgender and promptly lost every single one of my jobs. I never had a bad review. I lost every single job. In all 50 states of the United States, you cannot be fired for being transgender, but in all 50, you can be fired if you're transgender and you work for a religious corporation. Good to know. It's not easy being a transgender woman. People often ask me, "Do you feel 100% like a woman?" And I say, well, first of all, if you've talked to one transgender person, you've talked to exactly one transgender person. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I feel 100% like a transgender woman. There are plenty of things a cisgender woman knows I will never know. That said, I'm learning a lot about what it means to be a woman, and I'm learning a lot about my former gender. And I'm here to tell you the differences are massive. Let's start with the little stuff. The pockets on women's jeans. Why do they even bother? You know, I bought a pair of jeggings not long ago. They have stitching there that makes you think there's a pocket, but no, there's no pocket there. It's just stitching. You know, I spoke a couple of years ago in San Francisco at the Levi's headquarters. I thought, this will be great. I will find out about the pockets on women's jeans. I asked them, they're all like, "Yeah, it's just always been that way." That's it. That was their answer. Or the size of a woman's wardrobe. As a guy, I had a few pairs of jeans, a few pairs of khaki pants, a couple of blue sport coats. Really, what do you need? As a woman, I have closets and closets full of clothes. Because people will notice if you wear something too often. Well, men won't notice because they're men. But women will notice, and they will judge you for it. Here's a phrase you will never hear spoken to a man. You will never hear anybody to say to a man, hey, dude, that is not a good haircut for a man over 50. Because we don't care if a man looks like he's over 50 or 60 or 70 for that matter. But a woman, people say, who's your hairdresser? As if to say, do you really even have a hairdresser? And if you do, does she know you're over 50? There's no way a well-educated white male can understand how much the culture's tilted in his favor. There's no way he can understand it because it's all he's ever known and all he ever will know. And conversely, there's no way for a woman to understand the full import of that because being a woman is all she's ever known. I mean, she might have an inkling. She's working twice as hard for 83% as much, but really she has no idea how much more difficult life is for her than it is for the guy in the Brooks Brothers jacket in the office across the hall. I know. I was that guy. And the truth is, I will not live long enough to lose my white male entitlement. I brought it with me when I transitioned, but that doesn't mean I do not see my power diminishing. So I was brought onto the board of a large nonprofit, and we have a big annual conference. We had a brand new CEO. So we were talking about maybe having our new CEO give a keynote for the conference. And in a board meeting, I said, well, we could do that. She's not a seasoned speaker. It might be better if we just interview her. But hey, if you want her to give a keynote, I will be happy to coach her. At which point, a powerful white man in the room said, well, if we're going to do that, why don't we hire a real coach? Now, I knew a number of women there knew my credentials, and so I waited for one of them to speak up on my behalf. Nobody did. I can tell you what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say was, I've done 3 TED Talks that have had, 10 million views. I'm a speaker's ambassador for TED. I coach at the largest TEDx in North America. I've taught speech in 3 universities, 2 in the United States, 1 in Europe. Tell me what part of that does not make me a real coach? But instead I said nothing, because I had discovered by then, if you say something, well, you're just that woman. If there's just one thing I wish I could go back and tell Paul, it would be this. Assume a woman knows what she's talking about and treat her accordingly. Just that itself would go a long way toward gender equity. Plus, guys, just stop interrupting us. Seriously, just stop interrupting us. Do you know that men interrupt women twice as often as they interrupt other men? It is not easy being a transgender woman, particularly nowadays. On January 21st, 2021, it was my great privilege to be one of the speakers for President Joe Biden's inaugural prayer service. Quite a day, amazing. 4 years later, to the day, January 21st, 2025, I was sitting at my desk reading an executive order signed by the president the day before that said, I, as a transgender woman, do not exist. What a difference 4 years makes. I was talking about that on NPR in February, and I said, it's a good thing I renewed my passport in November, because had I renewed it in February, it would have had the wrong gender on it. But a couple of days later, I thought, was that a real bright thing to have done on NPR? How do I know that there was not some official out there listening to it who could have canceled my passport and issued a new one in the wrong gender? That's how paranoid we've become. But then I thought about it. It was NPR. None of the people who would have had the power to do that, let's be honest, they're not listening to NPR. Safe this time around. It is not a great time to be transgender, or to be anybody who is able to benefit from gender equity initiatives or any DEI. Not a good time for that. And we do need your help. We really need it. First, we need allies who will speak up on behalf of particularly our community. Pretty much everybody has abandoned us. Even those on the left have abandoned us. Now, those on the left and the far left have been some of the reason for that. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you want to, but the truth is we really need allies, and more than allies, we need apprentices. As an ally, you're speaking on our behalf, but you're doing it at your own direction. You're taking the power you have and you're deciding the way in which you're going to use that power to serve our community. That's great. We need that. But beyond allies, we need apprentices. As an apprentice, you're working in our direction. You're asking us, what is it you need? What do you need for me to use my power to do on your behalf? We need allies. We need apprentices. One of the things we need from the Christian world is stop apologizing for religion. I can't believe how many people apologize for being religious. The problem is not religion. The problem is a particular kind of religion. You know, we never took off as a species when we stayed at the level of blood kin. Never really took off. What is it that caused us to take off as a species? When we moved from the level of blood kin to the level of tribe. That's when civilizations began to develop. And what is it that brought us together as tribes? Everybody assumes it was our need for safety. It was not. It was our search for meaning. Think Stonehenge, or the carved bodies of Rapa Nui, or the burial mounds of indigenous Americans. When we came together, it was to find meaning in life, and that's when we took off. There is not any time in the history of mankind where there have not been robust religious communities. The question I have is, why have we ceded robust religious communities to the far right? Why are we not those robust religious communities? Jonathan Rauch is an interesting guy. He's a member of the Fellow of the Brookings Institution, also an editor at Atlantic magazine. And he wrote a book this past year, a really neat little book called Cross Purposes. And in this book, Jonathan Rauch wants you to know that he is a gay Jewish atheist. Okay, I'm not sure why you think I need to know that. I mean, that's kind of unusual, but he really wants the reader to know that because he's going to reach a conclusion in the book you do not expect, particularly if you know he's a gay Jewish atheist. The conclusion he reaches is that Christianity is a load-bearing wall of American democracy. Yeah. Christianity is a load-bearing wall of American democracy. And yet he laments the mainline Protestant church has abandoned Jesus on the left for a nebulous spirituality. Conservative Christianity, fundamentalism, evangelicalism have abandoned Jesus on the right for Christian nationalism. That's scary. And nobody's teaching Jesus' message to love God, love neighbor, and love self. It was the 22nd chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. It's the last time Jesus ever met with crowds at large. After this time, he's only going to meet with much smaller groups of people. He's got a big crowd here, and it kind of has a press conference atmosphere. Everybody has arrived with questions they want to ask Jesus. They know that he's open to talking with anybody. He answers 3 questions, and the last public question he ever answers is a good one. Somebody said, which of the laws is the greatest? There were 613 of them. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as you love your own self. There was no surprise in that answer. They began their religious services, in fact, quoting those words. It's what he said next that blew them away. He said, on this are all the law and prophets based. They'd spent their entire lives studying the 613 laws of the Hebrew Scripture. Jesus comes along and says, yeah, it's not really about that. It's about loving God, loving neighbor, and loving self. And what happened? Matthew tells us there was dead silence. This is a press conference. They got questions to take them till midnight. But Matthew says, from that day on, no one dared to ask him any more questions. So being a follower of Jesus really was that simple. To love God, love neighbor, and love self. It was simple. I did not say it was easy to love God. The God who burst on the scene 14 billion years ago, and all of God's complexity, mystery, and ever-expansiveness, rooted in relationship and grounded in love. And yeah, I just explained the Big Bang and more. The God who burst on the scene 14 billion years ago, and all of God's complexity, mystery, and ever-expansiveness, the Big Bang, rooted in relationship. You know, quantum physics tells us that the key building blocks of the universe are, interestingly, not made of matter. The key building blocks of the universe are made of a pattern of relationships between non-material entities. So if the key building blocks of the universe is relationships, is it really that much of a stretch to say the most powerful force in the universe is love? We want to love that God, the God who burst on the scene 14 billion years ago, and all of God's complexity, mystery, and ever-expansiveness, rooted in relationship, grounded in love. We want to love our neighbor, particularly those who do not look like us. And then you've got to love yourself, and the truth is, if you can't love yourself, you can't do the other two. Post-transition, it was very difficult for me to love myself. It's one of the biggest issues for transgender people is we take in and internalize transgender shame because it's what our culture tells us to do. So when I came out as transgender, I lost all of my jobs. I was a national leader in my denomination. I'd spoken in many of the largest churches in America. All of it was gone overnight. As a national leader, I knew, well over 1,000 people by name. In the 12 years since I became Paula, do you know how many of those thousands of people I knew for decades, do you know how many of them I've had conversations with? 6. Exactly 6. I lost my pension, worth well over $1 million. Not something you want to do when you're my age. I had loaned the ministry I was a part of $500,000 of my own money. They did not want to give that back. I had to threaten a lawsuit to get that back. They finally gave me back about 80% of it, about $400,000. It's a good thing because my first 4 years as Paula, I earned a total of $23,000, less than $6,000 a year. Had I not gotten that money back, I'd have been in big trouble. Now, since that time, things have gone very well for me. I did a TED Talk and another TED Talk and another TED Talk, and now I speak all over the world on issues related to gender equity. I have been elected as mayor pro tem of my town, probably going to run for mayor this coming spring. Life has turned out marvelously for me, but I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I was terrified and had lost almost everything, including my parents. I did not lose my former wife. We're still quite close. We're both therapists. We still work together. She remained devoted to me, though we are no longer together. But I lost my parents. My dad was a fundamentalist pastor. My mother was way more conservative than Dad. That'll keep you in therapy for a few years. And she demanded that he disown me, and so he acquiesced and disowned me, but I knew it was not his heart. So I took a chance and called him on his 93rd birthday. He took my call. We talked for about a half hour, and a few weeks later I called again and asked if I could come for a visit. He said yes. And then, very much a surprise to me, just a couple of weeks before that visit, he said, "Your mother's going to be there." And then on a warm April day in central Kentucky, I had a delightful 3-hour visit with my parents. And as I stood to go, my dad stood up with me. And he said, Paula? He called me Paula. The first time he ever called me Paula. And from that point on, that's all he called me, was Paula. He said, Paula, I do not understand this, but I am willing to try. My father was 93 years old, and he was willing to try. That is getting out of the boat. So Dad died at 96, right as COVID was beginning. So 5 years ago. I miss him so much. So David White is a poet who I appreciate a lot, and he also got out of the boat. He was working for the Boeing Corporation, earning a good bit of money, when he decided to leave that job and become a full-time poet. Good luck with that. And so while he had made this decision, he was at home there outside of Seattle, right on the water. And one day, as he struggled with what he should do next, a poem just came to him, and so he started writing it down as quickly as he could. It was reflecting the way he felt when he knew he had to get out of the boat. He said, when your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. It's time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. He said he was so excited as he's writing this poem. The words are just pouring out of him. It's like, finally, I'm going to have some insight. He gets to that line, you must learn one thing. Realized he had no idea what the one thing was. So just kind of set the poem aside. A long time before the rest of the poem came to him. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. You must give up all the other worlds, except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn that anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. One more time, the whole poem. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. It's time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing, you must learn one thing, you must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. You must give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn that anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Will you pray with me?